I can't play my music or it knocks our Facebook live stream. So you offered to sing, so I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, so I was doing that this morning in the car, taking my kid to school, and he not so politely told me to stop. So I'm going to spare the world.
There you go. Well, anyway, I had a great song. Sorry you don't get music this morning. You just get Jim and I for your Monday morning industry update. I asked Jim this question before the call. I said we were both kind of on calls on Friday with Gary Keller, and he was having real talk. And I think maybe the concept is there's going to be people that are going to be very despair and dark, if you will, around what's going on in the economic world. And then there's going to be people that live life with rose-colored glasses on, talking about their perception of the economic world. And at the end of the day, it's probably somewhere in the middle, to be honest. Like we got that. And I would ask myself the question, Jim, what's the conversation, even though if it might be a little uncomfortable, that I should have today that I'm going to be glad I had 6 months from now, right? So maybe that's our conversation today. And, Gary started talking about this book on Friday called The Shift. And if you've never read it, obviously, here's your reminder. You should go reread this. And at the end of the day, economics goes up and economics goes down. Mm-hmm. And I always like the analogy of surfing. And the analogy, Jim, is if you go to a beach and there's waves, and there's going to be big waves and little waves, but there's a lot of people that like to just ride the wave into shore. And that's okay. But in this analogy, the market is the wave, and we're going to have hot waves and small waves or big economic cycles and small economic cycles. But the reality is the top producer mindset, Jim, grabs a surfboard and goes and surfs the waves. And they create their own reality with what the market is giving them. So I've watched people in the worst of the worst markets in 2008, 9, and 10 grow their business by astronomical numbers. And I also watched some people that sat in reactionary positions and really took a beating, right? So not that we're exactly in a recession. We certainly know that everything good comes to an end at some point, and the debate is when, right? But we were seeing some signs of things starting to get a little squirrely or slow down, maybe just a little bit, right? But I don't think you're going to see it today. I don't think you're going to see it in the next 3 months. I think you made mention, you think we'll see it when?
I think we see the biggest one in September.
Yeah, I think so too. So this is the tough conversation. And remember, we're committed to being real with you on this call, not sugarcoating everything and just really looking at the hard facts unemotionally. So I need permission to share my screen. And when I do, let's dive into some numbers here. I'm waiting. All right, now I can share. All right, let's go. So here we go. I'll start at the lake for you, Jim. Look at this inventory level in the lake. It's the highest it's been since we've been tracking it since the beginning of the year. So everybody must be gearing up for lake house season and the weather warming up and getting those houses on the market. I still see closings and pendings are on the rise, but things that went under contract took a week off, I guess. So nonetheless, that's what's going on down at the lake. But what's going on in Rockwall? We nosedive this week. And if you look, we sold a lot of inventory this week, but our pendings went down too. Active under contract, option contracts slightly went up. What do you think happened?
Interest rates. Whenever you always had that first interest rate hike, I think that's where you're at. I've been kind of watching this with our showings. The showings have been going down anyway since June 1. We had a little bit of a spike the week before, but overall, our prime price points right now have been going down each, or not the 300 to 400, but 4 to 5. We've been going down, which has been kind of worrisome. And so once we had this rate hike, I think we just kind of had this shock. But I think that we're going to have a little bit of a normalization.
I agree.
In February, I had a lot of high hopes, though. You know, we were getting back to our new listings being pre-pandemic numbers in the area. And right now, we're going to struggle to hit what we hit in new listings last year. So I was really hoping we'd have around 220. I'm hoping we hit at least 200 this year in new listings.
Yeah. Here's the irony. Rockwall's an outlier. The rest of these counties, if I look at Dallas, went up. Dallas County went up in active inventory. Collin County went up considerably in active inventory. Denton County plateaued. Let's see, Hunt County flat. Kaufman County went up slightly. Hunt County kind of plateaued. So in a weird way, and then of course we already showed you the lake went way up, but Rockwall's the outlier here.
Yeah.
So what I think is interesting is a little bit of that's on us, meaning, hey, if everyone else is kind of active inventory going up, are we not doing a good job of getting out there taking listings? Or I don't know the answer to that. We can speculate. I don't get too excited or too disappointed in 1 week's results. My guess is we're going to turn that line around this week and active inventory will be coming up. But if you're a buyer's agent in Rockwall County, there's not a lot to look at right now.
Yeah. And I'll tell you one thing, Brett, I had to go back and just kind of double check this. But we did have a larger pending number come out the week before, right? Coming out of spring break. I always tell everybody, averages average out, right?
Yeah, of course.
Or an average. And so, yeah, you said it a second ago, the wave only lasts so long. So at some point, if you have an abnormality going up, you're going to have one on the opposite side.
Yeah. So remember, we were talking about, there's the I call it the clickbait articles, which says the world's falling apart, right? And we got one of those. And then there's a little bit of a rose-colored glass article, and we got one of those as well, all on the same media. So let's dive in. So here's the rose-colored glass one first, right? Why the housing market may not get as hammered as usual in this rate hike cycle. Tell me your understanding of this, Jim, and what this article is really saying.
You know, I think it's going off of a lot of what Zillow came out with an article this last week that said we're going to have another unprecedented amount of growth this year in sales price, in units. And I looked at that and just, but it was the same thing. Then there was the one on the opposite end that said, hey, we're going to have this 25% decrease. And so I think a lot of what these articles are going off of is you still have a lot of buyers that are out there looking. But at the same point, there's going to just be this give and take, which is why I think we're going to have these huge ups and downs just kind of across the board.
Yeah.
But eventually, Gary, I will always reference back to Gary back in the reunion and saying that, you know, right now people are buying their payment, right?
Yeah.
Because with interest rates being lower. And so that's where I think this misses the mark a little bit, where the interest rate cycle does hit, but yeah.
Yep. You know, I think this is an interesting statement right here that says investors are binging on housing right now, buying 42% more homes than a year earlier, even as prices surge. So they're buying up a lot of the inventory. We've known that. We've been talking about that for a while, right? But that's a pretty big spike to an increase in investor purchasing, right? which says that there's a lot of money moving into the industry, and you know, conglomerates buy it. Is almost a little bit of the REO asset manager of yesterday. Instead of managing the listing inventory, you're now managing a fund that wants to buy houses, right? And it flip-flop, but at the end of the day, the owner occupied is going down a little bit. It's 9.3 versus, let me get it, from 17.3 down to 9.3, right? So good, bad, and different, not really anything. It's just saying that there's movement going on, and really that's what shift is. It's not, this does not mean depression, recession. It says that there's movement. And when you're going like this, it's not really shifting. It's just moving up at a trend pace. But when you start doing this or this at a change of pace, that's where shifts occur, right? So we just stay on top of it. Here's the Black Hat Dark article, right? So it says the housing market is in the early stages of a substantial downshift. Home sales may drop 25% by the end of summer, according to this analyst. I don't agree with that. I think we're going to slow down. I think we're going to sell less homes. I don't think we're going to sell 25% less homes by summer.
No. Yeah. There's a lot wrong in this article, but yeah, 25% it's a pretty huge drop. But I did start thinking about the spread. So let's say that we are kind of returning to a pre-pandemic market. Well, just take a look at what we were doing pre-pandemic versus the last year. We had some huge numbers in June last year. I mean, if you look at the Netris trends, we had a huge spike. I mean, we had a spike that was at an all-time high, and then we had a month drop, and then all of a sudden we had this all-time high that just about went up 30%. So to say that home sales will drop by 25%, I sat back and thought about it today and said, it could, because we had such an unprecedented, it's like looking at the Rockwall number, right? We had this huge wave last week, and then we had this drop this week, and we're trying to figure out, and I think it's just an averaging out. So
it is.
Will it go down 25%? I don't know. But if we're up 20% in average sales price, you can still make up the difference.
Of course. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I'll just pull up this graph we shared, I think, last week. That's like saying in Dallas Fort Worth, we sold, can you see my screen? 192,437 homes in 2021. If we went 25% backwards, we would go down to 150,000, which means it would look like this from almost 2014. I don't think we're going backwards 8 years. You know what I mean? I think we'll see less. We may see 180,000 homes sold in 2022 in the Metroplex. And it'll be, you'll feel it. It's enough to feel, but I don't think it's going to go drastically backwards. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah. No, I'd be on board with that too.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, though, with your average sales price up, and this is one of the great things about real estate, you can control what your financial outlook looks like. Yeah. Right. So if we have these different levers that we can pull to make different things happen, then if we look at it and say, all right, if I just go off of a budget from a couple of years ago, but now I need to make up for inflation in my life and I need to make 2 extra sales, you can put together a plan to have 2 more sales.
100%.
You are not locked into a salary. You can make a difference in your own life, but you have to get off the couch and do it.
Absolutely. And that's surfing the wave, right?
Yep.
All right. So let's talk about being smart. So this says that this Unreal trend, it says the share of millennial home buyers is on the rise. Here's what I found interesting in this article. Let me just pull out some of this stuff. So they're saying millennials are 23 to 41. I'm not sure it's exactly the right age group, but it's pretty close to that. 43% of the US home buyers are in that age group in the last year. That's up 37% a year ago, while baby boomers, 57 to 75, they're the largest home seller group at 42. Makes sense, right? Like I age out of my house, I sell it, or I become an empty nester, I sell it. The millennials are buying the house of tomorrow as they're growing their families and things like that. But the 34% of millennial buyers were first-time home buyers. And of the younger millennials, those aged 23 to 31, 81% were first-time home buyers compared to 48% of older millennials. Now that we have younger millennials and older millennials, but obviously that's not earth-shattering news to me. But Gen X is 22% of the home buyers with a median price home of $320,000, right? Mm-hmm. So here's the thing, this is data. What do you do with this data? Well, it tells you if you want to play probability games and you're doing target advertising or target marketing, you could certainly analyze this and create a marketing campaign specific around the data in this article, right? You know, I haven't placed a Facebook ad in a while, but you certainly get to choose age range in your Facebook advertising or target marketing, or if you're doing pay-per-clicks and things like that. They let you break it down by age demographic. They let you break it down by different generations, and you could certainly go target messaging different to different generations and things like that, where I would probably target home buying messages to millennials, and I would target home selling messages to baby boomers, right? And you could target them differently. What do you make of that?
Yeah, you know, I did some research a week or two ago on this exact same thing. And just the overall, I mean, you have a huge millennial class that's coming through. And only 47% are homeowners. And then when you look at some of your older generations, you're at around 72, 70%. So you have this huge gap still. So there's such an opportunity there with millennials. But you have to, if you could just get into Google Trends and you can break down what they're searching for on Google by age range. And then you cater your ad, not just the demographics that you can build out on the back end, but the actual ad copy itself. And we don't just plaster up some photos. You can have a really meaningful ad that targets this millennial class, and is just extra effective at communicating with them, because it is not just targeted towards them, it's geared towards them. So that's one of the big things I'd say. And you have a huge opportunity there with that big of a gap.
Absolutely. And the real estate industry, as it's evolved, at one point in time, we wrote one newsletter and mailed it to everybody, right? Okay. Or one postcard and mailed it to everybody. Well, as the digital age of marketing and the digital age of advertising has evolved, you need to be more targeted. And those digital ads and the digital marketings, here's the data that tells you how to target and who to target where, right? So you shouldn't be a one-trick pony, as they call it. You should have targeted ads. That's why they call them targeted ads, and you're targeting certain demographics. So it's certainly important. You can get a copy of this article, we'll send it, but really important to kind of understand your audience and understand the home buying and the home selling probability game. Meaning, if I'm going to spend my money, I need to spend it on this, and if I should hold my money accountable to this, right? Make sense? All right. So on here talks about don't blame out-of-state buyers for driving up Texas home prices, economists say. I thought that was an interesting article, but I highlighted this as of 2019, the median age of new Texans was 29, with 43% of them being homeowners at 29. I thought that was really, people are buying houses younger and younger, I'm noticing. While existing residents were a median age of 41, with 73% being homeowners. That's higher than the national average for sure. I think there's a lot of relocation that goes on inside of Texas, and people moving around. It do you see, Jim?
Yeah. So this was a really interesting article, though. It referenced a lot of the 2019 census data and made a lot of conclusions based off of that data.
Yeah.
20 and 21 were not your typical year, so you kind of have to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. But I think what we had here was a domino effect, right? So were out-of-state buyers the sole reason for our price hikes? No, I think they're exactly right. You had inflation, you had a supply chain, you had a lot. You couldn't build new homes, and so all of a sudden you had this gap that resale just took off towards it. But when you get toward the bottom of the article, he starts referencing, well, you had California, San Francisco, and San Jose sellers that were netting around 500,000 on the sale of their properties. Well, we saw in North Texas, Plano up to Frisco, a lot of influx from California and from Arizona. And we talked about that on a call a few months ago, or back in January, of where all these out of town buyers came from. And so if you started looking at that, and all of a sudden you have this influx of cash coming to somebody that's in Plano, well, that person in Plano all of a sudden has an influx of cash. So it's just a big domino effect that just starts spreading really quickly.
Yeah.
And so it had to start with, you had to have it start somewhere, though. And it was really just a perfect storm.
Yep. Crazy, right?
Yeah.
And then DFW construction rose by more than a third in February. I think the builders are betting on the future right now.
Yeah.
I think they're making a lot of money. They're buying land. They're putting new permits under, because they're betting on this buyer demand, whether the interest rate goes up or not, is not going to dissipate in the near future.
Yep. Yeah, people are still going to need a place to live, and you've got relocations coming in from everywhere. And this article I really liked because it did segment later on the residential and commercial that's going on in the area. But yeah, I don't see a real stoppage unless all of a sudden a lot of these headquarters start pulling out of the area. And we're going to see maybe another article that's like this, because this is just what construction does in our area. All of a sudden they have a big wave. And so we'll start seeing really the advantage of this coming out later on in the year, hopefully. And then probably towards the end of the year, we'll see another big spike.
Yeah. And supply chain's not going to ease up anytime soon.
Nope.
And it's just going to keep driving the cost of these new construction up. But trust me, there's markup in that cost raise. And they're making good money, or they wouldn't be popping a whole lot more permits on the ground to build new construction.
Yeah, I haven't met many people in the new home industry not happy.
Yeah, they're okay right now. And you know what's sad about that? I don't want to get crazy, but like the people that are producing the lumber aren't necessarily seeing the price increase. It's the people from when they pick up the lumber and get it to the new home to be built that are getting the inflationary benefit, if you will.
Yeah.
But that's supply chain, not production of product, right?
Yep.
All right, Jim. Last thing is our little 10-year treasury popped down just a little bit at the end of last week. So maybe the rate hike will hold for a few days. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think this is going to be such a tricky year. And I laugh every time I think about this, because at the beginning of the year, they had, yeah, we're going to have a couple of rate hikes, but come by the end of the year, we're going to be closer to like 3% of interest rates. And I just, no, like y'all are just missing the point of what's going on right now. Yeah, it's going to be kind of this slow trickle. And I like the analogy of boiling a frog. You don't just have the heat up right away. You got to ease it up, right? You got to have the water increase gradually. And so that's what we kind of had through the first part of this year. And then we had that rate hike and everybody freaked out. But it's like, no, the rates had already gone up by more than that rate hike.
Yeah.
And so we're going to see some little fluctuations up and down, but overall, we're going to see this small climb up and then we'll have another pop.
Yeah. Just curious, have you ever boiled a frog?
Not recently.
All right, Dan. So what are we taking? Like, I started this conversation around the ship book, right? And said you're going to see, or you're going to hear or read or whatever you want to say. Some people are just going to tell you depression, recession, everything's falling apart. You're also going to see some people with rose-colored glasses thinking that nothing's ever going to change. The reality is it's probably somewhere in the middle. But we probably should be talking more about this, knowing that what a shift is if we run an upward trend, there's going to be a down notch. Everything that goes up comes down at some point in time. The industry we've been borrowing sales from the future for a little while now. And it's going to correct a little bit. I don't think it means that we're not going to be able to create great income and have great real estate businesses. But this is where the seasoned agents are going to go, yeah, we understand everything that goes up comes down. The inexperienced agent's going to feel anxiety or stress that the world's falling apart, which is not necessarily the case. They just haven't lived through it yet before.
Yep.
And I always remind people, you can always create your own reality in any situation, no matter what cards you're dealt. It's a probability game, and that'll be. I'll die on that sword, right? Like, what's your take on all this?
Yeah, no, I got into the industry in 2007, 2008, and I remember walking to the office and my first day, and somebody said, "Don't you know people are getting out of this industry right now?" And I just kind of laughed at it. But I always think back in that time versus right now. And that's what newer agents are really going to have a problem with right now, because they've been able to put creativity ahead of principles a little bit. And we've got to get back to those principles. We had a lot of people in this office that had great businesses still thrive through 08 to 12. But it was a business based upon core principles, right? Yeah. And that's what we really have to focus in on.
Yeah. And I'm going to throw another P word at you, which is proactive. You're saying principles, and I would say being proactive, meaning, which is really the same thing. It's a proactive is a principle of real estate. We've talked about that question. How would you sell real estate if there was no MLS, right? It's because we've gotten reactive, meaning I pick up a buyer, I'm waiting on houses to show up in the MLS. Well, guess what? None showed up in the MLS in Rockwall County last week. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm not going to just wait a week for something to show up. I'm going to go be proactive and find houses to show.
Yeah, I want to brag real quick before we leave on one of our agents last week.
Yeah, please.
On that, they used one of their greatest tools, their business card. They were at a car wash and just started handing out business cards to people at the car wash. They ended up with the seller and a buyer.
At a car wash. There's a song for that.
Car wash with
Sing it,
cards.
Jim. At the car wash. Never mind. Yeah, there went our music. All right. Happy Monday. Have a good one.
Have a good one.